course, like any criminal, sooner or later you get caught, and I was no exception to that rule. I was actually arrested just once in my life, at the age of 21, by the French police in a small town in southern France called Montpellier. The French police were arresting me on an Interpol warrant issued by the Swedish police, who were looking for me for forgery in Sweden and believed that I was living in France. When the French authorities took me into custody on the Swedish warrant, they quickly realized that I had forged checks all over France, so they refused to honor the warrant and Sweden's request for my extradition. They later convicted me of forgery and sent me to French prison. I served my time in a place called the Maison d'Arrêt, the house of arrest, in a small town in southern France called Perpignan. Steven Spielberg told Barbara Walters it was extremely important to me to go back to that prison, to the exact cell he was in, and reconstruct it according to the logbooks during his stay there, which he said to my amazement was a blanket on the floor, no mattress, a hole in the floor to go to the bathroom, no plumbing, no electricity. He said, I entered the prison at about 198 pounds, left the prison at about 109 pounds. When my sentence was over, I was extradited to Sweden, where I was convicted of forgery in a Swedish court of law and sent to a Swedish penitentiary in Malmö, Sweden. When my prison term was up in Sweden, U.S. federal authorities took custody of me, returned me to the United States. Eventually, a United States federal judge would sentence me to 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of the 12 years at a federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. When I was 26 years old, the government offered to take me out of prison on the condition I go to work with an agency of the federal government for the remainder of my sentence until my parole had been satisfactorily completed. I agreed and was released. This year, I'm celebrating 41 years with the FBI. I work in Washington, D.C. I make my home in Charleston, South Carolina. So I commute up on Monday mornings and return home on Thursday afternoons. I live in Charleston with my one and only wife of 40-plus years and my 3 sons. So every Monday when I go to work, I have a lot of emails. And many write and say, you know, you were brilliant. You were an absolute genius. I was neither. I was just a child. Had I been brilliant, had I been a genius, I don't know that I would have found it necessary to break the law in order to just simply survive. And while I know that there are people fascinated by what I did some 50 years ago as a teenage boy, I've always looked upon what I did as something that was immoral, illegal, unethical, and a burden I live with every single day of my life, and will until my death. There are many who write and say, well, you know, you were certainly gifted. That I was. I was one of those few children that got to grow up in the world with a daddy. Now, the world is full of fathers, but there are very few men worthy of being called daddy by their child. When I was 16 years old, I was just a child. All 16-year-olds are just children. Much as we like them to be adults, they're just children. For me, a complete stranger said I had to choose one parent over the other. That was a choice a young boy could not make, so I ran. How could I tell you my life was glamorous? I cried myself to sleep till I was 19 years old. I spent every birthday, Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day in a hotel room somewhere in the world where people didn't even speak my language. The only people that associated with me were people who believed me to be their peer, 10 years older than I actually was. I never got to go to a senior prom, high school football game, share a relationship with someone my own age. I always knew I'd get caught. Only a fool would think otherwise. The law sometimes sleeps, but the law never dies. I was very fortunate because I was brought up in a great country where everybody gets a second chance. I owe my country 800 times more than I will ever be able to repay it in my lifetime. That is why I'm still at the FBI today, 32 years after a federal court order has expired, ordering me to do so. I have turned down 3 pardons from 3 sitting presidents of the United States because I do not believe, nor will I ever believe, that a piece of paper will excuse my actions, that only in the end, my actions will.